if he wants to play on his TV in his room. It's really funny. Hi, Aspect. Never got to hear you rant about amiibos. Okay, I'm gonna start a run and then I'm gonna rant about amiibos. I was actually just going on about it. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so basically the game came out, the game Breath of the Wild came out in March, and the game was ruined by amiibo by April. So there's a lot of things that a lot of people just didn't expect about amiibos. And during the beginning of the game, people, the mods, unfortunately decided that the amiibos would just be allowed just straight up for the runs, and it wouldn't be a separated leaderboard. The leaderboard was simply going to be separated where a run would denote whether or not you used an amiibo, and that was it. So it was just like huge clusterfuck of people who were like, I don't want to spend any money to compete in the run, and they're like, well, you don't have to use amiibos to speedrun. And they're like, yeah, but it's on the same leaderboard, so there's really no competition unless you buy amiibos. And they're like, well, then you can just deal with it. And that was their answer. At the beginning of the game, though, it didn't seem like amiibos were going to be that bad. So amiibos, like, the only thing you can do with amiibos in the first 2 weeks of the game was just spawn Epona. And people were only running any percent. It wasn't that bad. They would just come out on the, like, they would just, like, do the plateau like normal. No amiibos, no junk, no none of that. And they get off the plateau, they spawn on Epona and go straight to the castle. And that was it. It was fine. Like, it was honestly fine. If you use an Epona versus not using an Epona, it was like 20 seconds of difference. And it's very, very doable. Very, very doable to compete without amiibos. That's why SVA actually has a really, really good time without ever using amiibos, because he's just really good at the game and he just, you know, doesn't want to use amiibos. So everything was fine and dandy then. There was still a discussion about, like, you know, I don't want to use amiibo because I don't want to spend money, and that was valid, but again, it was only 20 seconds and they didn't think that it was going to be that bad. But here's what happened later. About 2 weeks after the game came out, people were very, very actively hunting for stasis launches. So stasis launches is a tech found in Breath of the Wild. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. It involves using stasis on an object and then getting hit by the object as it flies away, and then you get a large boost of speed as you can fly all the way through the air, you know, across gaps, across across large fields. There's a lot of things you can do with stasis launches. They saved a lot of time in any place where you couldn't use a horse. And when stasis launches came out, people were just simply looking in places where you can do stasis launches. For example, anywhere with trees, you can do stasis launches because you can chop down any tree, do a very quick setup, and then you can do the stasis launch off the tree. And that was the easiest method for a long time. Unfortunately, that means stasis launches can only be done in locations where there are trees or boulders or rocks or pots or something, or treasure chests. Like, they've used a lot of objects for stasis launches, but only a couple of them are actually, like, super consistent and doable. Well, here comes the amiibo. The amiibo has a guardian figure. The guardian figure drops large metal crates, and large metal crates are the easiest objects to do stasis launches off of. So now, not only do you have access to stasis launches that are easier, you can also do them in any place where you couldn't do them before, because there's a lot of places that simply didn't have any trees, such as, for example, in Goron City, trying to get to the Elden Canyon memory. There's really no object to do a stasis launch off of except for a metal crate at the bottom of the canyon, or a little clay pot, which is like a little, like, piece of shit. It's so hard to do a stasis launch off of that because it's just so inconsistent. So that's another thing, is that now, like, people are using a ton more amiibo simply because you can do stasis launches. And before even stasis launches came out, they were using a Toon Link amiibo, and the Toon Link amiibo spawned attack up fish. And not only did it spawn attack up fish, but it's actually random whether or not you got an attack up fish. And the attack up fish could be used to make level 3 damage up food inside Hyrule Castle on the way to Ganon's fight, which sped up the boss fights in 80% by at least 30 seconds if you were to get a triple, like a triple damage up And before, like in 8% without amiibo, you would have to cook like beetles and horns, and it was only random. It was only like a 40% chance that you would get a level 3 power up, whereas if you use amiibo, it's a 100% chance. So there, like, here comes a lot of things that people just never expected there to be, you know, this huge problem. And keep in mind, amiibos are $13 a piece. It's not easy to get a collection of amiibos to speedrun with if you were to do them legitimately. But here is the kicker. Here is the worst part about amiibo, in my opinion, is that not only did, like, the initial argument was like from the people who are fans of amiibo in the speedrun was, you know, nut up, spend the money, and then you can use the amiibos in the run. Like, if you want to use amiibos, you have to spend the money. That was one of their main arguments. But as soon as there gets to be like an uncontrollable amount of amiibo, they start to use what's called NFC tags. And NFC tags are a lot cheaper option for amiibos, which involves buying a simple NFC chip from Amazon for about, you know, $3 to $5 a piece or so. And the thing about that was, you know, it's not official amiibo. So now, not only are people using amiibos unfairly gaining an advantage over other people, they also are doing it illegally without the consent of Nintendo via unlicensed products, which means they're basically using a Game Shark, honestly. Like, they are using third-party products that are not licensed by Nintendo to change aspects about the game to go faster. And to go faster in a way that you can't do without using amiibo. So, you know, not only is there this huge like price, this huge like entry fee of getting amiibos, but now you're doing it illegally. So what's the game plan here? Like, you say amiibos have to be allowed because they're part of the game, and then when you use amiibo, you're not even using them in the intended way. You're doing it in a not allowed way, in a way that, you know, if you were a Twitch partner and you were caught using unlicensed Nintendo products, you would get reprimanded. You know, you can't show off you using third-party products to affect an official first-party game. It's not allowed. It's literally not allowed to use, and the fact that they swear by it is ridiculous. It's almost like the same kind of it's the same kind of mentality that pissed me off about the Pokemon competitive scene, is that they say, like, not only do competitive players use things like Pokegen and PokeCreator and like homebrew and save states and all these things that make competitive Pokemon like easier to obtain, where they can just, you know, spawn and create whatever Pokemon they want. They swear by it. If you go into a competitive subreddit, like for example r/Stunfisk is like the main competitive subreddit, they can be like, hey, how are people getting these 6 IV you know, Ultra Beasts? And they just say, oh yeah, just use save states, just use power saves, just use the homebrew, use like whatever hacking tools you can to get perfect Pokemon, because everyone's doing it. And it's like, what kind of community are you where you're straight up advertising for third-party hardware hacking the game in the name of getting an unfair advantage over other people? It's ridiculous. And it's part of the reason why I never wanted to play competitive Pokemon. Like, I always would get started. As soon as I beat a Pokemon game, I'll get started making a competitive team. I'll do a whole bunch of research, I do a whole bunch of breeding, I do a whole bunch of everything, and like, I do all that legitimately, and then I just realize that I'm at a huge disadvantage over people who just simply hack their Pokemon in, and when they hack the Pokemon in, they can get way more battle experience, and that's something I don't have because I spend time battling. And partly this is a problem with the Pokemon Company. Of course, they do make it really hard to get perfect Pokemon, especially Pokemon that are like Ultra Beasts, where you can only get a couple of them per game. So, you know, it's not really guaranteed, and it's not easy to get any IV higher than 3. Like, if you were to get a 5 IV or 6 IV Ultra Beast in game, that would be like a godsend. And then you have to worry about the nature as well. And, you know, even if you synchronize, that's only going to be like a 50% chance of whether or not you do it. But back to Amiibo, it's like the same sort of thing. The community is straight up advertising for, like, if you want to enter the game, you can just go ahead and buy NFC tags and then change your game using third-party hardware. And I think that's ridiculous. I think it's a competitive game. You shouldn't be allowed to gain an unfair advantage over other people simply for spending money, even if it does change the route. You know, it does change the route. It does change a lot of things about the game. It's not like the exact same game with free time save. But you are changing the game to get an unfair advantage over other people, and I feel like if it's a competitive leaderboard, that should not be allowed. So that's why I feel like no other game in the future, if they ever have DLC or anything that's affected by amiibos in the future, there's going to be nobody the mods will never let that happen again unless they get the twisted ass like Twilight Princess secret shadow government mods that they got in Breath of the Wild, like Dragonbane and fucking Tresgo and shit like that. And Orchestra and other people who are huge proponents for amiibos, but just simply did not understand what it meant to, you know, have fair competition, which I think is the most important part about speedrunning. You want to have it as accessible as possible so that people can run the way they want to and still be competitive if they choose to do so. And if you like say amiibos are banned and you want to use amiibos, then you know you can just do your own runs, but you won't be allowed on the leaderboard. That's how it should be. It should be the most accessible thing possible. The biggest reason communities grow or fail is a matter of accessibility. It's always a matter of accessibility. Is it accessible for competitive Pokemon players to get competitive Pokemon without hacking? No. Is it accessible for speedrunners of Breath of the Wild to get competitive times if they don't use amiibo? No. Is it accessible for people to pick up Splatoon, a game that they played online for a bunch of times, and get a really good time in Splatoon? Yes, it is. It is very accessible. All you have to do is make a new account and start the run. That's all you have to do. I made sure that the Splatoon was as accessible as possible, with no fluff, no filler, no anything, nothing to change the game, no kind of like unfair advantages. Then again, Splatoon was very good about it because the single player is very one-dimensional. There's not really much you can do other than play the game itself, and people liked it. Splatoon is still one of the most popular speedrun games like in the new age of video games. You know, there's a lot of single runners. A lot of people ended up doing like, you know, one-off runs, just like, hey, I want to try it out. Or some people just did ILs, or some people just, you know, like grinded for sub 1 and stop playing, and that's fine with me. You know, as long as you're trying to speedrun, it's a great introductory game, and I feel like that's how every community should be. It should be accessible and like have tutorials and be able to help everybody without being a toxic community with a whole bunch of debates whether or not things should be allowed when they obviously shouldn't. So it's something that I feel very strongly about, is the accessibility of the game. It's the same reason like piracy is so like not frowned upon when it comes to like video games. Like for example, if you're in Australia and you don't have access to a video game because Steam doesn't offer it in Europe or something, then people are just gonna pirate the game. Like you know, cable sports, for some reason the cable companies are just like clinging on to sports. It's like the last thing that they have access to, and they know that they're losing the online streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and all these other things that are just super accessible to people who want to pay for a subscription. And all they have to do, like if ESPN was fucking smart, all they do is just like they have a premium service to stream games. Like that's all they have to do. I personally would be 100% for paying like $10-15 a month, $10 to $15 a month just to get access to sports. And I'm sure my brother would as well. That's all they'd have to do. But instead, you know, they hide it behind these really expensive cable packages, and they make it impossible for people to watch. So what do? They illegally stream it on YouTube. So that's what Joey does all the time. Joey just like finds streams on YouTube to watch the hockey games because he can't watch it on TV. Can't watch it on TV at work. Can't watch it on TV at home because they just don't have it accessible. So, you know, they're losing money to all these people pirating when they could just be, you know, selling their product like they could be without doing that. So, how long have I been talking? I've been talking for like 13 minutes. All right, I'm done. Let me read the chat. All right, I'm not gonna respond to any more amiibo related stuff. You guys can clap if you want. That was a pretty nice little rant.